Good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to this interesting panel discussion on utilizing data insights within the group. The British mathematician Clive Humby had predicted that data would be the new oil. How true his prediction has turned out to be. Today, most organizations are reaping rich dividends from the data that gets generated from both within and outside the organization. In fact, the volume of data that is generated in a single day today is more than what got generated in a full year in the not too distant past. There are basically three dimensions to data, popularly known as the three V's. The first V relates to the volume of data. The second V is the velocity of data, that is the rate at which data gets generated. And the third V relates to the velocity of the veracity of the data, how authentic is the data. Survey shows that data-driven organizations are more likely to succeed in today's highly competitive and VUCA world, as opposed to those companies whose decision-making relies heavily on opinions and gut feel. However, data is of little use unless it is mined and harnessed properly for business benefits. With the kind of sophisticated tools that are available these days, combined with some of the Industry 4.0 emerging technologies, such as artificial intelligence and machine learning, it is now possible to deep dive into the ocean of data and extract meaningful insights out of this data. CIOs across the globe have two major challenges associated with data. One is to be able to store humongous amount of data. We are not talking about just megabytes of data, but several petabytes and exabytes of data that need to be stored in a safe, secured, and cost-effective manner. And the other is to be able to intelligently mine and harness this data for business gains. I am joined by a distinguished set of panelists today. Mr. Debajyoti Dasgupta, Senior Vice President from Firstsource. Mr. Sanjay Prasad, CIO, CSC, and Power Group of Companies. Mr. Yazad Anklesaria, Head IT Saregama. And Mr. Prashant Achanta, CTO of Firstsource. In fact, I will be asking the same set of questions to each of the panelists and would request them to respond over two rounds. Now, given the time constraints and the time that has been allotted to us, I would request each panelist to spend not more than 5 minutes in answering each of the questions in round 1 and 2. So the first question for round 1 is, how are you addressing the challenges I just spoke of and the benefits you're currently deriving out of the data in your respective organizations? I will request Mr. Debajyoti Dasgupta to respond first. Over to you, Debajyoti.
Thank you, sir. Thanks for the introduction and the. Okay, so my role here is slightly different, and I come from the analytics industry. So whatever experience that I will be sharing will be more from the point of view of how we have seen analytics projects being executed for diverse clients across the globe, right? And one of the key things that we have often encountered as part of any client discussion is the reticence on the part of the client organization in implementing high impact analytic solutions. And the reason why they do so is because they fear that they will lose control over the data assets. Now, we all know that data is the enterprise's most valuable and irreplaceable business asset. And this often gives the organization's competitive edge. And at times, it also exposes them to regulatory risks, right? Now, when we talk with organizations, the other challenge that they're often struggling with is that, as Debashis rightly mentioned, is that they're getting flooded with big data in some form and shape, right? And it's just adding to the challenges that they have on the ground. And it is just not the security aspect, right? But it is more in terms of how do we ensure data safety in case of this ever-growing data, because we need to constantly ensure that we are managing the historical records, and we are able to retrieve the records in a timely fashion as and when there is any requirement from the business standpoint. Now, what we or rather I have experienced in my professional career is that when we are talking about information security processes, or in terms of gatekeep, or when CIOs are designated as gatekeepers of the data of any organization, it is not often that they have put in place very stringent or very comprehensive InfoSec protocols, right? But at times we often realize that there are very limited processes or frameworks that exist in the first place. And oftentimes the easy solution seems to be just putting blanket restrictions, generic protocols in the name of data security, but the same can be counterproductive. It becomes a major hurdle in terms of product innovation, or in terms of the way we respond to business challenges, right? And we have to acknowledge that in certain cases, these concerns are genuine on the part of the CIO, because they are stemming out of the regulatory requirements of keeping the data within specific geographies. I have my colleague Prashant Achanta, and he would agree that as part of many of the deployments that we're looking at, there is a need to keep the PHI data within the US boundaries, right? And as an example, this is something that we have been working with a leading US-based healthcare insurer. We were pursuing a project in which we were supposed to implement an AI-driven cognitive data capture and processing solution on a set of insurance documents, and actually feed them into a claims workflow. Now, the claims workflow had two distinct forks, right? One was where you would funnel those documents into a straight-through processing. The other would obviously have a human in the loop from an eyeballing perspective. Now, offshoring this type of work seemingly was very easy, and something that can be done by multiple specialist vendors like Firstsource, because the cost benefits are extremely high. They could at times be as high as 60 to 70%, right? However, due to the HIPAA, it is not straightforward to migrate the data back to India. And the way we propose to solve it is by deploying a mix of onshore and offshore team, and where the onshore team would handle the PHI data in a highly secure US confined environment, and we would provide mass data to offshore team for further downstream processing, right? So this is one example where data security challenges obviously exist due to specific information security restrictions being imposed by regulatory bodies, but there's always a way in which CIOs along with the business teams can work towards circumventing this problem. I will take one more example, Debashis sir, before I hand it over to my other distinguished panel members. Like, for cloud service providers these days, be it the likes of AWS, be it Amazon, right, have made our lives extremely easy by providing or provisioning different services which ensure that there's a high degree of encryption, there is strong account management principles embedded, there is an identity and access management that is available on your fingertips, there is a multi-layered security protocol in place, right? So it's not necessarily that in some organizations that this problem exists in terms of not having the requisite set of fallback options. It also, what the organizations need to do is that, how do I put in place a grounds up approach which involves how do I define my data in the first place, which is essentially the data classification processes? How do I sensitize the culture of data security and safety? How do I establish clear governance principles? And very honestly, I think my panel members would agree that in today's day and world, there are treatments and pills for everything, right? And I don't think the hyperscaler companies or the cloud providers are in any form lagging behind in terms of anticipating future needs and trying to enable the CEOs to perform their role more effectively.
Thank you, Debajyoti, for expressing your views so lucidly. In fact, I'm quite impressed with the way, data is being presently handled at Firstsource. And more importantly, how you're leveraging this data in multifarious ways. I will now move on to our next panelist, Mr. Sanjay Prasad, for his views and comments. Over to you, Sanjay.
Thank you, Debashis. Looking at what Debajyoti just spoke of, it is obviously they have a far bigger challenge of twofold. One is harnessing their own data as an enterprise, as well as making sure that they preserve the data of their customers, multiple customers across multiple geos having different stipulations. So in that respect, maybe I can scale down the problem a little bit in case of pure enterprise by itself. But on the other hand, looking at the power business, they are again having regulatory controls, not only at the central level, but also at the state level. So in a way, we are actually looking at multiple paradigms for a company which is spread over 7 cities as far as the distribution objective distribution business is concerned. Now, I will, Debashis spoke of 3 V's, and I think veracity is, I will actually debate a little bit on the veracity piece, because while part of the transaction system is supposed to, generate a lot of veracity after going through a lot of maker and checker, in today's world, with the amount of structured and the unstructured data, the mix is variable, and the unstructured data is actually now coming in far more volume and velocity than what we had thought of earlier. So variety becomes an important V in this whole paradigm of 4 V's. So the classical way of how we used to look at store data, the ultimate purpose was to consume, because you needed to take decisions. And it followed a very first principle sequence of collecting, storing, process, analyze, and then visualize. Because unless you visualize, you don't know the full engine that has happened prior to that. So traditionally, you used to have a data store with that you used to parse that data into a data warehouse, and mostly transactional data, and using intelligent indexes, partly through your knowledge of the design of the database system that you have, and partly through experience, you were able to do the right queries through a calculation engine and bring those results for consumption of your business users and of course the IT professionals. Given the variety that has now crept in, and the another important thing is velocity here comes into play. So transaction systems has its own rate of velocity in the data that it comes in. You have the challenges at the end of a quarter or end of a month, when sales in any organization actually traditionally goes much higher than anticipated. But at the same time, things like sentiment analysis, social feeds are not seasonal, they are random. So to that extent, in-memory analytics today play a lot more enabling feature in order to offset some of the disadvantages that you see in a traditional analytics build. So why in-memory analytics? Because it not only allows you to store data away from the classical way of rows and indexes into columns, and therefore the whole end ingestion goes multiple times faster in an ability to get that data ingested earlier, and also the speed at which you are able to consume that data without any formal optimization has actually led to in-memory analytics to be a feature of the day. Having said that, looking at the group companies that we typically talk of, for instance, in the CSC scheme of things, you would have your multiple sources that lead to a staging layer through a Pentaho tool, which is essentially the data integration layer as well as the ETL layer, as you may call it, then moving on to a data warehouse on MySQL, and then doing the actual statistical modeling and analysis through R or Python, and then leading upwards into visual, in the visual mode, which could be, historically it could be a SaaS platform or the Tableau that we typically use today. Correspondingly, in another group company, you would have, which is running on an, SAP system, you would obviously have, again, multiple sources of data, but you have an advantage of a single stack in the way that the ETL layer is and the data integration layer is all part of a SAP business warehouse. Sorry, this is part of ESG, energy conservation. I'm not doing enough movement, so it just lights went off. And obviously, in the data analytics engine, again, there's not much difference. You still use things like Python, R, as well as PySpark. And on top, you have the SAP business objects and Lumira. So the classical stack still remains the same, depending on the database system and the ERP that you're in, the names could vary. However, as unstructured data, again, I'm putting focus on unstructured data, and now Debashis' part on veracity. If your transaction system is not veracity enough, then there is a thought process that whether you need to go the classical way of E, T, and L, or whether you need to do some amount of loading first, massaging first, and then doing the transformation. So this is a debate which design practitioners should exercise, given the fact that veracity becomes a pivot in this particular example. At this point, I would also put upon us whatever data that we are collecting on behalf of consumers today, that the liberty that we had today would typically get curtailed multiple fold as the privacy bill moves into an act. And that's the point to ponder in I think the second half, when we talk about how we are going to sort of look at from a group concept of collecting and mining this data for different purposes. So Debashis, over to you.
Thanks, Sanjay. In fact, thanks for pointing out the fourth dimension, the fourth V, apart from volume, velocity, and veracity of data. The fourth important V is the variety of data. Especially, it is very contextual today, the kind of data that we need to handle, the variety of data that needs to be handled today. With electricity regulators favoring smart meters in the power distribution company, we shall soon see several lakhs of smart meters replacing the conventional meters. And with each smart meter emanating 96 data points over a 24-hour period, one can well imagine the huge volume of data that's going to emanate from these smart meters. And there's going to be a challenge for all CIOs in the power sector to handle this humongous data and not only, store it, but to be able to, mine it intelligently for various purposes. Thanks, Sanjay. So we shall now move on from the power utility vertical to the entertainment sector. So our next speaker is Mr. Yazad Anklesaria from Saregama. Over to you, Yazad, for your response against the backdrop of the challenges we all spoke of.
Thank you, Debashis, for this opportunity. In Saregama, we actively put data in almost all of our decision-making processes. The data we collect and the data we divide, we process and store around 8 billion data points in a month. But here we divide our data based on the on the revenue functions. For example, we have a B2B and a B2C. These two business lines or these two revenue lines are very, very different. For example, our B2B is all about licensing our content to a Savan, Ghana, Apple Music, and our B2C is selling of Carva, after sales support, CRM, things like that. So our data of B2B will have an impact on the decision that we make on the content that we will acquire, because we need to acquire content to ensure that our licensing deals are better year on year. So all of our data is towards the business main objectives. So for example, if I take B2C, where all our data is for customer acquisition and customer retention. So over there, what do? We use certain methods for domain exploring to understand which natural groups already exist, which are the products we should be developing, which are the offers which may be being accepted. And then the same way for our customer support, how should we structure our customer care from the point that a Carva is sold, the warranty is registered, and what happens to that customer throughout our entire post-sale cycle. So from a retention perspective, because for us, the challenge is that the person who buys a product may not be the person who might be using it. So that is where we focus our effort, our methods, and our processes upon. From a B2B side of things, the content itself, we have India's largest library. So what are the tracks? What is it performing? How is it performing? All our new acquisitions, how are they performing against the competition? So we need to track multiple sources. We not only need to track our data, but even from a T series or Z music and things like that. So our technology stack is in-house on premise. I'll come to a part why it's still on premise. We have the star and snowflakes type of schemas where we create data cubes. Because we are on premise as of now, I know myself that there are certain compromises that we do horizontal partitioning, that we may not require the consumption data that is a year old. But slowly, since the past 1 year, we have realized this to be a limitation. So we are working with different partners to figure out, as Sanjay may explain, that in memory, how do we do it? Can I take 6 terabytes of data and get the insights then out of it? So that is the kind of challenges that we face. And we are just moving towards finding a solution towards that.
Thank you, Yazad. What you spoke is really music to my ears, and no pun intended. Truly impressed by the innovative, methodology adopted by Saregama in getting the best out of this oil, new oil. We now come to the fourth panelist, Mr. Prashant Achanta, who is the Chief Technology Officer at Firstsource. Although we have had a speaker from Firstsource, I'm sure Prashant will bring in a different viewpoint of data, more from a CTO's perspective. Over to you, Prashant.
Thank you, Mr. Roy. Just summarizing, the conversation so far, right? I mean, we are in like a multi-generational shift of the new oil, right? So started with a structured world, right, in the past, moving to unstructured, both in terms of data architectures and also in terms of like the new formats which are kicking, right? To moving right now to the world where it is about dark data, right? So what do I mean by dark data is, the new data architectures and the cost of storing, processing has come down so much that, we are able to capture, a lot of insights hitherto we were not able to, right? Like, for example, you have a Saregama subscriber, on the contact center talking about a billing dispute, right? But, over like an 8-minute conversation, it is likely that, it could also go to music preferences, right? Or like family size, right? There could be all sorts of aspects, right? And I've seen that with one of our larger customers, Skype, right? You're trying to retain a customer. The conversation is about channels, preferences, right? You get so much of social insights, right? All of that data, it is being started, it's starting to get tapped into, but like a lot of enterprises are not really tapping into the dark data, right? So that's the next generation, or the current generation of data that we are in, is like, how do we bring out insights from data that, that we're not looking at today, because, you're collecting data with a certain viewpoint, right? At Firstsource, right, we also don't view data in isolation, right? So it is data. It is the systems, with leverage, processes that, get value added, and insights that get generated, right? So it is this entire, 4 towers which come together, basically consume and make sense of the data. And for us to do that, governance is key, right? And purely viewing it from a data lens, it is about classification of data. It's about criticality of data. It's about, who has access, how do you do backups? How does this fall in from a business continuity lens standpoint, right? And depending on the area in which we operate, and we have like, very structured domains and groups, we have those controls and governances, like a data officer of sort, like, having that perspective. Otherwise, very soon, you would have, with the cost coming down so low, right? Almost $4 or $5 like terabyte a month, right? Particularly with cloud storage, there is this general tendency to consume more and more, right? So you need some controls. And the other part of how it works is, we run a tight ship, right? So, myself, Dev and team, are doing the insights. We have a very strong procurement and an infrastructure function, right? So together, we are able to procure right, we are able to operate right, and we are able to govern. Right? That is more in terms of, how we operate. But to give you an example, right, as to, how this is all coming to life. We serve the provider business in the United States, right? So these are like hospital systems. It's a $100 million business for us. And traditionally we've been doing like, 3 or 4 major servicing aspects with using our platforms, right? One is, members or patients who walk into hospitals without insurance. We provide that support for them through the hospitals. We apply for, federal and state aid so that, the patients are able to be treated, and, the hospitals, which can't turn them away, also are financially compensated, right? That is one aspect of our business. The second silo we used to run is like patients come in, they don't really know their insurance details. They have multiple insurances, right? All of those need to be sorted, right? So that has been another siloed business. And then post-care, we operate in the early out collection space where, there is some co-pay, there is some payments which are pending. We have to follow up on behalf of the hospital with the patients to be able to collect, right? And this is the revenue cycle management piece. These operated as silos, right? Now, with the new data lake architectures coming in, is it okay, Mr. Roy, if I finish and then we do the Q&A? Seems like we're out of time.
Yeah, maybe you could spend another half a minute more.
Okay, understood. Thank you. So, what we are doing is we are bringing in a new data lake architecture. We are unifying the backend, right? But unifying the backend does not make sense if we don't have use cases, to service our customers. So, with the backend unification, we are able to look at the front end and offer a more diversified and consolidated set of services to our customers, right? What we are also able to do is, traditionally we used to strip out all the, unnecessary data and use only what was relevant to us. Now we are consuming, or we are looking to consume all the data which comes in, through the EDI formats, right? And start to give more insights to our customers in terms of, helping providers avoid denials, right? Avoid underpayments so that their fiscal metrics improve, right? So long story short, with a mix of governance, with the mix of the new big data lake architectures, and running like tight integration, between our various teams, we're able to deploy, data and improve, revenues and margins for our clients in the provider space.
Thanks, Prashant, for touching upon dark data and the technical nuances associated with data, and especially the security part which you spoke of is so important, considering that cyber attacks and threats are rising at an alarming rate. Now, with this, we come to the end of round one. Shomopriya, how are we doing time-wise?
Sir, there are 10 minutes remaining. So
okay, fine. So what we'll do is we'll quickly get into round two. I know the question that I'm going to ask is going to please Sunil Bhandari from Cross Synergy, and I'll request each of the panelists to speak for about 2 minutes or so, and then we'll have some time left for question answers from the audience. So over to round two. Having successfully managed the data and also having derived substantial benefits out of the data in your respective organizations, how do you think the data residing in your repository can be, gainfully cross-utilized for the overall benefit of the entire RPSG group without violating security and privacy norms? Over to you, Debajyoti.
Thank you, sir. So I think I will break up my response in two parts. One is per se the data that exists within the Firstsource estate, and second is what are the data-driven offerings or accelerators that we can put to use among the larger RPSG group, because that's also very important. The reason why I say so is because Firstsource as a company operates in very specific markets, and we are bound by very strict protocols around data usability. However, having said that, there are specific data sets that can still be leveraged by the larger organization to drive very pointed business outcomes. For example, let's talk about two use cases. One is how we can create a single source of employees across all group companies, mapping them to the various skill sets that they have, which can then be leveraged for any redeployment or rehiring, thus reducing the time to hire or the time to fulfill that we often highlight as a challenge when we go out and start scouting for relevant skill sets that we're looking to onboard. And this is very relevant in the case of, let's say, G&A roles or G&A functions. When I talk of G&A, I am talking of, let's say, logistics functions, technology support functions. I am talking of information security, analytics, data science, because these are very transferable skills across. Yes, obviously there is a domain layer that is sitting on top of that, but yes, we can still use it, use this database to actually see how we can derive value out of it. The second example that I would want to quote is that can we create a single view of suppliers across indirect spend categories, particularly in areas which could be around technology outsourcing, which could be around transport, it could be around professional services, corporate supplies, so on and so forth, right? And what it will help us to do is that it can help us drive vendor consolidation, better cost savings across very targeted categories that we believe there is an opportunity for us to do so, right? So within the larger RPSG group, these are the two things that I believe where data within the Firstsource can be used. Now coming to the second part of my response, which is around what is that we can use outside the data. So in Firstsource analytics, what we have done is over the last multiple years, right, of engaging with different clients, we have been able to curate or build specific analytics assets or data accelerators, right? Now, accelerators could be process accelerators, it could be functional accelerators, right? Now, to give you an example of what does a functional accelerator mean in context of a of Firstsource, right? A functional accelerator could mean like I have created a domain specific data model where I have been able to identify the relationships or the interrelationships between different data sources as they pertain to a system. For example, it could be a banking data model, it could be a retail data model, right? When I talk of process accelerators, I am talking of ways in which I am able to quickly process the data that I am ingesting into a form which can then be rendered as useful from an analytic standpoint. For example, can I do data cleansing? Can I put in place AI-based data quality management processes and solutions in place? So there are a bunch of such accelerators and assets that we have created for different clients. And we can also leverage our vast partner ecosystem that Prashant Achanta's team and we collectively always look out in terms of expanding, because not everything can be built in-house, right? One very specific example in terms of the skill sets that Firstsource as a company has developed in the last 5-6 years, we have extensively worked on customer interactions analytics, which we call as First Customer Intelligence, FCI. It's one of the flagship solutions that we take to the market. And what we have done is that we have been able to mine millions of customer interactions, which Prashant often refers to as the dark data. And we have been able to mine these interactions in the context of 3 or 4 use cases. How can we reduce customer churn? How can we gain insights into customers and competitors? How can we generate more sales? And at times we have also used it for an inward facing operational efficiency improvement. How can I eliminate incidents of agent non-compliance, improve their efficiency, and so on and so forth, right? So I think that in the RPSG setup, this experience and accelerators can really unlock a lot of value for the various group companies. And it's very important that we pick up specific use cases and then look towards how we can bring into play not only the data, but also the data-driven accelerators that can collectively deliver much stronger value output for the organization.
Thank you, Debajyoti. Great to hear that a lot of scope exists, and we can explore. And I think the way to go forward is identify specific use cases, as you rightly suggested, and then see how well, your data can be cross-utilized for the benefit of the entire group. Now, over to you, Sanjay. Sanjay, you're on mute.
Debajyoti did pick up a lot of horizontal areas, and I just intend to add one more in terms of it could also be, take a look at all the assets across the group horizontally, and that would be a big area where spend could be controlled in terms of really procuring at scale. And there would be special equipments which we need to knock off, which is very specific to a particular vertical or business, but there would be a lot of a horizontal cut which will happen across the group, and that's a big area where we can actually hit the bottom line. That's one. We did talk about the customer as one view, and it came across in both Shashwat's talk as well as Anand also talked about it as part of the loyalty program. So, for instance, I'll give a very prosaic example: bill-face advertising. We continue to do it. It's something that was running for years. It was also there in my previous company, where you could, take a coupon, go to, and in this case, Star Bazaar, and if you do enough sales, you could actually get a discount for that 1 for 2 in Starbucks. I'm just talking historically. Here also, a similar thing could apply for the retail business, feeding on your the Saregama business and connecting the power company. But what is the basic construct that needs to happen to do this? One is to get the right demographic view across the 3 particular businesses that I just spoke of within our group, and to really understand, because earlier each company was selfishly looking at the cuts of the consumer that was pertaining to itself. So there were areas where it was like a black box, but certain elements in the black box may be relevant for Saregama, may be relevant for retail, and therefore we need to agree on what would be the common using a political term, common minimum program, where we need to build that demographic view so that we can then aggregate the transactions in each of these organizations to see who is actually a platinum customer, who is a gold customer, and blah, 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 a silver, etc. Now, a platinum customer who is paying, say, 15,000 and above bill for a power company residing in the same city is actually not feeding off from Spencer's retail. So if you mine his data within the retail business, you would find that he is some customer you would discretely have or not have. There must be a reason for that. So it opens up two areas. It is not cross-sell here. It is actually you're upselling within the same vertical. That means this consumer is actually a platinum consumer, but we have not been able to mine this consumer and sell our own wares I'm just using examples in retail. And at the same time, this becomes a cue for marketing to say, what is it that needs to be done holistically to touch such set of consumers? That's I'm just a use case that I'm trying to build up. The second one is obviously very clear. You have the same consumer is platinum and gold, and you just need to cross-sell to bring parity so that you can have the same amount of proportionate spend coming in from his wallet. We need to go a little deeper down in understanding the consumer. A platinum consumer could still be a lifestyle platinum consumer, and he could be in a term which is often used, a conscious or a seasonal platinum consumer. Meaning, I'll just give an example. His 15,000 bill across every month, irrespective of the season, is relatively uniform. So he's that lifestyle consumer. He doesn't bother if is optional AC is working or not working. But a conscious or a seasonal consumer would find that his AC consumption during those peak months, winter months, drop down. So therefore, we need to map whether it's the Nature's Basket and higher end of Spencer's retail that need to meet the taste of this platinum consumer, and looking at the premium brands that need to fit in. At the same time, lower end where you would get the mass, and Evita would probably match a silver or a not so silver profile of a consumer. So it's very important to build this holistically and understand this across the group, because then in that case, it is important that we come across a very first cut PNL of what we intend to achieve after we do all this that we want to. And then it makes sense to put in money into the designing of that system beyond the prototype. Actually put in, that's my take. And I'm saying partly from my earlier experience where there were the other pieces, we need to get the boards on board, the respective companies boards on board, because we are still federated. And it is important from a compliance perspective that this part needs to be ticked off before we take it forward. Thank you, Debashis. I know we are in short of time, so.
I know we are running short of time, but thanks nonetheless for highlighting several.
Sir, I'm so sorry to interrupt. Actually, our guest speaker has just joined in, so we would like to move on with the next session. So I would request you to kindly wrap this session up.
Okay.
For any questions.
Yazad and Prashant, just within half
sir,
a minute.
Sir, just I wanted to add, for any questions from the audience to this panel, they can type it in the chat box, and we will be sending the questions across.
Fine. I mean, that's a great idea, Shobhapriya. So we'll end the session in the next 1 minute, since the next speaker has joined in already. So Yazad, half a minute. I know it's unfair on both of you, but if you could quickly, wrap it up within a minute each. First to you, Azad.
Sure. Thank you. I will just continue from what Sanjay was saying, because my interest is also in B2C that comes as the entire group. I believe each company needs to specify the insights that they want to work upon. For example, as in Saregama, we lack demographic data of our users. That's the nature of our business. We don't ask users to sign up. We just ask the users to use our services. So we cannot have 100% scientific model when we want to acquire users over multiple ad networks. What if at a group level we merge our data without sharing the PII data with the group companies and relate my customer data to maybe Spencer's or CSC's 4.3 million customers, only to understand where my user belongs to in terms of demography. And based on that, I create models just because I don't have demographic details, and then just create those models which I can use them further. So I will end it over here.
Yeah, thanks, Yazad. Over to you, Prashant.
Okay. So I'll cover two topics, 30 seconds, Mr. Roy, right? So one is, I think when you look at cross-company, cross-group collaboration, the three vectors are customers, right? Clients, suppliers, employees, right? And, we have to look at what are the overlaps between the segments, identify the use cases, get ideas, right? That is part one. And maybe a good way to start is pick a group, right? And figure out how to collaborate, right? Like have a simple collaboration platform, which is accessible, etc., that can kickstart, right? So that is recommendation one. The other recommendation that I want to offer the group, Mr. Roy, is, at Firstsource, we are really proud of the IPL franchise acquisition that that our group has done. And we are happy to make recommendations on who gets the box seats, right, across locations. If that is something that we have to own control, we are happy to do that.
Great. Ending on a great note with cricket. Thank you, gentlemen, for sharing your views and insights on data. I'm sure all of us would have got a sense of comfort from the way the data is being presently handled at Firstsource, at CSC, and at Saregama, who incidentally deal with large volumes of data, and also how their specific data can be gainfully cross-utilized across the group for business benefits. Thank you so much. Over to you, Shamopriya.